here with Taylor Bray. Taylor Bray is front of house for
Dan and Shay.
Thank you so much for having me here.
Thank you.
It's awesome to be here. Dude, it is like a freaking cockpit in here. It is
NASA,
amazing.
You know?
There is so much like gear stuff that I would love to get to, but I want to start off with,
we'll get there.
I know you didn't just graduate high school and like walk into this.
Sure.
What got you into running sounds?
Growing up, I was in bands, of course, doing that whole thing, touring in the Southeast, and did a bit of like house of worship sound stuff when I could, cut your teeth like in the youth room kind of vibe.
Yep.
Great place to do that if you're that like teenage age, because it's very forgiving and they take anybody usually that wants to push the buttons. So learned a little bit there, and I always kind of had the tech bug, but was doing the music thing. And as I got into high school and kind of more and more saw my band work with producers, I was like, I want to do that. I want to be on that side of it. I want to kind of be like the behind the scenes shot caller, put the pieces together, arranger, kind of more so than like having to be on the stage. That started up like that. I would start to record friends' bands and do more of the studio production side of things, I guess.
Oh, you're one of those.
And that little rig grew bit by bit, and then went to college, stayed in South Carolina for a little while where I grew up and did some gen ed stuff, but I finished my degree at MTSU, did their recording industry management program.
Whoa.
Cool. I mean, it's a 4-year bachelor in this stuff, which is, there's not a lot of live sound offerings, but there's a bit of reinforcement stuff, and learned some good things there. And then had a couple great professors that I loved and that pushed me, and that I could tell I cared, and I was a little ahead of the curve, and not just like, I don't know, playing a rock band, so my parents made me go to college, so I'm doing this. They were, that I was more serious about it. And so they engaged that, and that led to opportunities post-graduation, where whether I was cleaning up post-production audio, for them, or, doing rough mixes, or even, starting to pick up some live gigs where they'd pick up a summer gig and then have to go back when classes were in session, and they'd call me up and say, hey, you want to jump on with this person or that? And the rest is history.
Okay.
You work hard and do the thing, and people recommend you.
So connect the dots for me from doing that now with Dan and Shay. How'd you get hooked up with Dan and Shay?
So speaking of college professors, one of them, John Merchant, actually, shout out to John Merchant. He's worked with everybody in the world. Awesome dude. I think he's still at MTSU. He was like my advanced mixing guy and sound reinforcement guy there, and he was out with Ricky Skaggs in Connect. We were talking about Ricky earlier, how much of a golden human he is.
Ricky, I love
the
you.
Best man. Me too. Love you, Ricky. And he called me, shortly after graduation and said, I've got this gig that I think you'd be good for, but you gotta sell into it. I don't want you showing up for a couple months. Like, you need to commit to a year or two with it. And I was like, yeah, I'm broke and just out of college and trying to, be self-employed. And yes, that sounds awesome. And Ricky was super gracious to me, and a really good place for me to get like sort of a little more serious into the live thing. And working with bluegrass artists, that helped a lot. Like, all of those musicians are just God tier and absolutely pushed me to do less and make the moves count more and know how to get out of the way and be transparent. And it was a really interesting, challenging first gig where it was all about my ears and all about like light touches and kind of like getting out of the way of their awesome musicality and performance. So I did that with him for years, loved it. Ricky was amazing to me, great tenure there. And then I had produced a record for someone who was good friends with Dan and Shay's TM at the time, Chase Bennett, who's with Little Big Town now. And Chase had heard I was the guy and called me up and took me out for coffee and said, hey man, we're going out with Blake Shelton this summer, and they don't have anybody. They don't have any, it's me and the band. They need everything. What can you do? And I came to rehearsal and started fixing stuff, and the rest of that's history. That was it,
Dude, I love that.
It was, let me touch your guitar. Let me touch the playback.
Yeah.
Let me touch this console, and everyone was really happy. And
so they gave you free reign to actually play around.
Basically, yeah. And I was just
cool
doing
is
ears
that?
for that tour, and Blake's front house guy at the time was picking them up and gracious, and then we started doing one-offs, and I started doing both more and more, and that developed. And I toured with these guys for years, doing everything off of a single console, like Abby was just talking about, doing ears and monitors at the same time, and running between the two worlds when something's wrong. And I don't recommend it, but I cut my teeth like that and kind of earned my stripes. And
What console were you on?
that was all M32. Yeah, we had one M32, and then we had two, and then we added an X32 below a rack one in Monitor World for some extra inputs and summing talkbacks. And I mean, we were using every little nook and cranny of I/O in that thing by the end of it. But we started out some better pre's and some Outboard and upgraded a little bit and kick it down the road. And we did huge tours like that. We did use that in Australia and the UK. We did it in arena tours and I mean everywhere, you know. So it held up well. I was glad to get out from under it once it was finally time.
Sure.
They owned it, saved them a lot of money. It was a cool kind of, you know, rig building thing for me to, and yeah, that was a good way for me to also to like build a lot of confidence with the artist. So they basically didn't have an audio rental budget for like the first 4 or 5 years of career. And we just kept supplementing little bits and pieces, a couple $1,000 a year and kicking it down the road. And you always outgrow that, of course, you know, and these guys have had a really good trajectory and they did in a big way, but we got a lot of mileage out of myself, you know, a scrappy, hungry, hardworking engineer and some M32s. So.
There's a couple cool things that you hit on. I think the number one question that I get is, how do I get started? And I too did church, and church is a fantastic way to really cut your teeth, and there's always people that need volunteers with it. And honestly, this stuff is a great accessory, but you can do a lot of cool stuff with an M32, and it's really, I was described to me as like a paintbrush than just the actual source for it. And really focusing on source tone, microphone, and the rest of this is a little more sprinkling. Because I'm sure take all this away, you could still mix. Have them sound good.
Yeah, well, that was a lot of choosing this desk. I know we'll get into that, but I wanted a desk that I just felt like I had everything I needed in it, and then the rest was accoutrement, and I could have it if I wanted it, but didn't have to do it, right? If we do a flight edit, I load a file, and I just do a little more on the desk, and it works. But you're right, the M32s, and we have that little DM3 over there as like our, we call that our oh fuck mix. That's the, like, if a console explodes, we can just go to just acoustic inputs and still have a show. The guys can go on the thrust and acoustic guitar, 2 vocals. They can entertain while we reboot or whatever.
Wait, so you can mix the show on this?
Yeah, well, we would go to an acoustic, just a 3-input thing, but we have one on both sides. And it's all analog, it's isolated, you know, from the rest of our world. So if this desk needs to be rebooted for 5 minutes or our playback blows up or whatever,
redundancy, maybe.
The guys can go, you know, and it would be hokey and weird, but it would also be a cool experience for the crowd. So yeah, that's one of those. Honestly, that was the brainchild of our artist, of Dan Smyers. He kept saying, man, could we just have like a wired 58 or something up here just in case? Like just the confidence thing of like, what if the console burst into flames? Sorry to jump around, but that was, you know,
have you had to use it yet?
Brainchild of that. We've not. We say it's the umbrella. If you bring it, you won't need it. So we set it up every day and we check it every day.
If you don't bring it, you won't need it.
We line check it every day, you know, to ward off the bad juju. But so far we've not needed it, and it's great to know it's there just in case.
What do you feel like are some of the mistakes you made starting off that you look back and you're like, knowing now that you maybe would give yourself some advice on?
Sure.
Especially like when you first started getting touring and getting...
Yeah, there's like a tech side to that, and there's more like a social, relational side to that. I think relationally, feeling like I needed to prove myself, that was always like my lot. I always felt like I was ahead of the curve, and if someone would just give me the opportunity, I can do it. I've been doing this since I was, you know, a kid, whatever. Let me. Watch, look what I can do. And I think knowing your place and knowing the time and place to show up and shine, and also when to just facilitate and be part of the machine is important. Kind of reading the room. Those soft skills are really important. That's some of the biggest advice I give to, you know, studio interns or kids trying to get into this too. It's like, there's going to be someone better than you. It doesn't matter how good you are. I don't care what degree you have or what school you went to or who you studied under. There's going to be someone better, especially in a town like Nashville or LA or Atlanta. There's a more capable engineer. There's a better player. There's all of that, you know. Does the artist want to be around you? Did they like you? Did they like your energy, your vibe, the way you interact with them? So for me, socially, relationally, I probably was heavy on the pedal a little bit out of the gate, trying to show up and exist and prove myself. And these guys were so sweet and gracious. The band, we've all been here about 10 years, and they were very patient with me as I got my Young Buck stuff out.
You've been with for 10 years?
Yeah, this is my 10th year with these guys.
Bro.
And same with, you know, most of the bands, a little bit of the back line. We've got kind of a core dozen guys or so that have been around that long. And then on the tech side, I mean, I'm a big proponent of, like, if the bar needs painting, fucking paint it. Don't. I see people post on Reddit and stuff all the time, like, look at this EQ curve this desk came back with, and it's like, man, you don't know what that sounded like. You don't know what that mic was, what that source was. Like, if you need to hack it up, hack it up. Yeah. Learn, you know, good principle, gain staging, and try to understand why you're doing what you're doing. Don't just do it, but if you don't have the ears for it yet, do it until you do. Push those boundaries, put it into extreme settings so you can hear it when you're able to, whether that's compression or EQ or whatever, until you get used to it. But if you think it needs something or it's not quite right, trust your gut, trust your ears, turn the knob. Fuck what it looks like or what someone tells you you should or shouldn't do. All that matters in the room for the crowd and them connecting to music is how does it sound. And you're facilitating that, so make it sound good. Whatever you've got to do, however little or much you need to do. Don't feel like you've got to do it, but if you feel like you need to do it, do it. Really, really trusting those instincts. Honing them and trusting them is probably the thing that gets you the gig. It's not about this stuff, right?
Sure.
I could own it all and show up with it all and be like, look at my cool kit, but the kit doesn't get you the gig. It's the vibe and the energy, and it's especially the ears and the instincts. Those things are the only thing that like is your calling card as an audio guy. It's do you have the instinct? Do you have the ear to know what it needs, or to know it doesn't need anything, and to just not touch it or touch it a lot? So
I've said this quite a few times on this channel, but it really still rings true. Is and I had to learn this starting off, especially with the digital consoles, is mix with your ears. It may look weird.
Yeah.
There's a band up there. Mix with your ears for it.
Well, and not all digital consoles are the same, and the EQ, the dynamics, whatever. Some of them can do really extreme settings that aren't really very musical. Some of them, even in musical settings, don't sound very musical. Yeah. Some of them you do a little and it sounds awesome. Some of them you do a lot, it sounds like nothing. So you just can't rely. Visual feedback is one of many tools in your toolbox, but it should be your third, fifth, eighth, ninth tool, that you rely on. Even tuning a room is like that too. We take traces and we listen, but my illustrious SE Eric Thomas over here is very good about tuning by ear. We'll look at the trace and we'll knock some bumps down and we'll smooth out the room a little bit. But at the end of the day, it's really walk it and listen to it. And how does that vocal sound? How does that snare sound? How does low end feel here versus there versus here? Bump delay time, or, change a curve a little, put an FIR in or take one out, whatever. And at some point, fuck the trace. It has to sound good.
Sure.
All that matters is how it sounds. So trust your ears, do it with your ears. And if you don't trust them, work on that. Focus on that. There's lots of ear training tools out there. There's lots of free resources. Take 2 mixes into your DAW and whatever, and just boost and cut and play with EQ and GarageBand, whatever resource you have. Just move things around and get used to hearing. We had to do critical listening classes in school where it was just pink noise with bands boosted by a couple dB, and you had to, this band, that band, and that stuff's golden. It's really important. Doing that or listening to feedback and knowing where it is. Those fundamentals. That's how you get to trust your ears, I guess, is believing that you've got a pretty good sense of that stuff. Yeah. So valuable hours put in there, I think, more than reading a manual or learning gear. It's about the ears. It is.
So you mentioned SE. Mm-hmm. I think some people may not know that for a tour this size, you actually have an SE that comes with you and tunes the room. Correct. Talk to me a little bit about the relationship between you and an SE.
Sure, that's a great one. So your SE, your systems engineer, really is responsible for getting the PA up in the air every day and trying their best to make it sound relatively the same from room to room to room. And obviously the physical dimensions of the space, physics always wins and you're never going to overcome that. But we do, and Eric especially, the SE does a lot of things from the position of the PA to the curve of the boxes to how high it's flown to timing between that and actually some EQ, some FIR, and IR filters to try to make that the case so that my palette every day is relatively the same. Maybe in a little different light. Sometimes we're 10 feet closer or further. There are plenty of things that change and make it different, but he's working on sort of squashing that variance and trying to mitigate that as much as is musically possible.
Sure.
So that's sort of the goal of the SE, and then also, monitoring the system during the show, keeping us out of limit, making sure we're using the available PA, and using it efficiently and using it well, dealing with the openers as well and making sure they interface into that well and they leave me enough room to get my mix where it needs to be in terms of volume and size, but also that they have a good show and that they have what they need to, to please their folks. So this is my third tour doing this with Eric, and I'm super grateful to have him every time we have him out. He's an absolute wizard. And again, we'll get into the musical side of things with me, right? It's not just like, well, there you go, that's a blank canvas, have fun. Like the math says it's good. It's like, well, it says it's this, but I'm hearing this, and I walked it. I like this filter here, and I like pushing this a little more today. How does that sound for you? Let me take it out here. You take it out there, and then I'll put this back here. Like there's that very give and take sort of relationship that I think is necessary to get you that last 5 or 10% out of an employment. I really do. A lot of times you see SEs and front house guys maybe not quite on the same page, or like, I did my job there, you do your job. And I think when the two become like more of a yin yang and kind of give and take to one another, I think that really gives you a much higher ceiling of what you can achieve and kind of the impacts you can get. Something that's loud, that's clear, that's awesome to listen to, that's flattering, that's musical, but also that maybe you can still have a conversation over. Finding that mystical balance. I think that requires either a lot of luck or an SE and an engineer who are willing to tolerate one another's needs and desires and work together. Because the end goal is the same, like, hopefully, right?
Yeah.
Some SEs maybe just want to deploy a system and say, look, there. But I think I know someone like Eric wants it to sound awesome. Like, he gets off on that the same way that I do. Does it sound good? Are people connecting? Are we moving air and moving people, physically, but emotionally, really, to connect with the music? Are we facilitating that? Are we making it better, So, yeah, that relationship I think is absolutely critical. And even if you're the opening act, respecting the SE, I've done a lot of that with these guys where we were first or second or third and really trying to integrate into the SE's world, understand what they're doing, asking them questions, making sure your stuff is in the space they allot you and that you take up the time they allot you, being respectful of kind of the rough limit of how loud they would like you to be and where they'd like you to fit. Those things are never withholding on purpose or to be a jerk. They're meant to make the entire show flow the way it needs to. It's sort of a global vision of the night. And so I think that's another great point to engineers that are up and coming and starting to get into some of these places where maybe they're direct support for a cool act or whatever. Really respect the SE and try to get in their good graces, and you're going to have a better night. So I think it's worth that.
Talk to me about your approach to tuning. So when he does his thing, you walk in. Is there a song you play? Is it
Eric's got plenty of stuff. I've got some stuff too, but we don't do as much of that as we used to, and we do a bit. But we record every night, and we have virtual playback. That's what's making the meters bounce right now. We've got a Pro Tools rig back here, and so for us, virtual is really the thing. Like, we're kind of keeping up night to night and knowing sort of what we're aiming for, and so we know what it sounded like last night. We know how the room felt, and so tonight we're listening to last night's recording, and we're going, ooh, right away, what's poking out, what's sticking out. So obviously Eric does, checks all the loads and sweeps and does all of that stuff. And there is a little bit of touching that happens to that. But for us now at this point, a lot of our tuning is just, well, what's the 2 mix sound like? What does your mix from last night sound like tonight in this room? Cool, let's make it so. Let's fix it or let's adjust it or do whatever we need to kind of get it back to that spot. But I've got a playlist, on Spotify somewhere with some reference tunes, but I find myself using it less and less. If I'm my own SE and like punting at a big festival, then if they let me, I'll play 30 seconds of this, 30 seconds of that and go, okay, got it. The curve of today is like this, and I don't like this range, and I like this range, and I need to carve this out, I need to comp this a little harder. I can, a minute, 90 seconds of hearing a PA full scale, and you're like, yep, okay, I know what I need to do for the day. I may chase it half the set, but I know what I'm going for. I know I need to soften this 3K, and I know I need to subs are really aggressive, and I probably need to shove off some of my low end or whatever. And that's an interesting thing. We've had this conversation a lot recently, but when you're your own SE, when you're kind of in between the level we're at here and you're walking up into it, you're just the front of house guy and you're maybe 3 of 6 on a big festival or outdoor, whatever. Or you're showing up and maybe you have your own lake, your own smart rig. Maybe you don't have any of that. You're just using your console, parametric, hopefully graphic if you have to. But I did that for years too, and I think you can do a lot like that. I think that makes you sort of a mastering engineer, and that's where the studio background of mixing and mastering in the studio helped me a lot. Where it's like, I don't want to change my kick drum every day. I don't want to change my lead vocal every day substantially, right? I want to touch them, but I want to be doing little touches. I want to believe my mix coming out of the desk and know it's right. And if I need to do big tilts or big moves, I want to do that across the entire mix. Because the next night I'm going to have to undo all that and chase my tail, and you find yourself never trusting the way your inputs sound. So I think gain staging and listening to the inputs and really optimizing your inputs to your buses, to your left, right, and believing, on headphones, on near fields, on whatever listening source you have. I don't care if it's your AirPods, something you're used to listening to music on, you go, yeah, my mix sounds like a good live mix. Yeah, I can hear everything, everything's clear, the separation, it's punchy, it's packaged, whatever adjectives, it's doing the thing, it's serving the artist, it's serving the music. But then when I pushed my master fader up into this PA today and I heard it for the first time, it wasn't doing that, or it wasn't like that. Why? And let me broad stroke across the whole mix, sort of tailor it into this PA today. Because I can't redeploy it. I'm not going to refly it. I don't have an SE to do all that for me. But I have to act as my own SE. And it's a lot more efficient, it's a lot faster to not fret over all those inputs and go, there's just too much low. There's just too much low end, and I hate 2K. And so I'm just going to dip a bunch of 2K out until the vocal isn't buried and the guitars aren't gone, but now that's a little softer. And I'm going to, and that's not the ideal approach to tuning a PA. But when you are throw and go and you are not given hours to do the thing, when it's not your PA you're carrying, it's not your rig, I advocate strongly for that. I think it's the best way to do it. I think, again, if the bar needs painting, paint it. If you need to do a broad stroke, a cut, a shelf, do it.
Yeah.
You know, a filter. If you got to high pass your mix at 50 that day to get more efficiency out of it, fine.
Yeah.
Like that matters. That vocal intelligibility and the whole band being heard matters more than the fact that your kid drum sounds like a T-Rex or Godzilla or whatever.
Yeah.
People don't come for that. They come to sing along. So like, get yourself out of the way, get your ego out of the way, you know, and do whatever you need to do on that 2 mix to push your mix into that PA to make it sound as close to how you know it does on cans as you know, as a reference as possible. So that took years to learn for me, and I think that's a really important. Again, I started with that, I guess, kind of saying if you need to do it, do it. If you need to put those filters, do it. But that, to me, that I think more than anything refers to your 2 mix, like getting set up with something virtual as soon as possible where you're able to record. You know, most people have a laptop if you're serious about audio, and getting an interface, a USB situation, something where you can record at least 32 inputs, you know, of your set a night isn't a super hard thing to do. And if you have a vendor, they'll rent you that for pretty cheap a week. And recording every night and then listening back the next day, even if it's just on cans, if you're the opener, if you don't get the PA very long, use that time, you know, use that time and do your homework and I know these headphones, I listen to thousands of hours of music a year on these, or these in-ears or whatever they are, these near-fields, and I believe this. And when I push it up, I don't. So what do I need to do broad stroke to fit it, you know, and fit that square peg round hole? Yeah, and whatever, who cares what it looks like we were saying earlier.
Yeah.
Just filter until it sounds right. And I mean, I've had lake pages where we're the support act for arenas, for stadiums even, where they look terrifying. And you would be like, you know, you load it for the day and people are like, good luck with that, man, Jesus Christ. And they hear it and they go, well, okay, yeah, well, that sounds really nice.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, well, I have to go do a different gig tomorrow, not on this tour.
Yeah.
And if I do all that on here, on every channel, then tomorrow's gonna sound like shit. And then I'm gonna come back to you and I'm gonna be going back here and I can just save that page in the lake instead, or, you know, do it on my 2 mix in 3 or 4 minutes and tilt and push that mix to where it needs to be and then reset it and do it again tomorrow.
Yeah.
So that's maybe a counterintuitive workflow to some people, but I really encourage people
I love it.
to work like that. I think that is the way. If you're a young engineer, if you're pushing your mix, you know, your younger artists into a club one day and a festival the next and here and there and everywhere and a theater and then maybe this cool stadium hometown gig or what, like do whatever you got to do.
Yeah.
Get on that 2 mix and just beat it up and get through that gig and then do it again tomorrow and learn why you did and walk around if you can too. The iPad control nowadays with consoles, getting out of here. If you don't have an SE, get out of your little bubble. I mean, 6 feet either way in any direction sounds so different.
That's
even
true.
with an SE that's 3 minutes copy. Even with a great SE that tries to neutralize that, you're gonna get that. You know, it's just the function of space and time arrival and physics. So move around and experience the space. And if you have a little M32 or you have this or an SXL, you know, whatever, they all have different Yukon and iPad controls, and get a little router in there and get an iPad and walk around.
Yeah.
You know, listen to what it sounds like down there, because those people paid to be here.
Sure.
And because they pay the promoter to be here and your artist gets a cut of that, you get paid that day. So like that's who you're really in service to.
I
It's
love
a
your
service industry
mindset
gig,
like
you
that.
know?
I love
So
it.
You got to look at it that way.
I love it. All right, we're going to take a quick break.
Yeah.
We'll be right back. We're going to talk a little bit about some equipment. So we'll be right back.
Just some reps on the console
Yes.
here. Lift it up.
Doing some dips on there. We're back. Let's talk a little gear. Let's start from the top. SSL,
The heart of it.
the heart of it. Why SSL? Did you start with this?
Great question. No, so I've been on everything with these guys. Like as mentioned earlier, you know, M32s for a while. We started at the bottom, now we're here, as they say. This desk I think is just the most musical sounding digital console that's out there. I think it sounds like music. I think every band of EQ, the whole dynamic section, the built-in premium stuff, you know. You can do a show with this and no DSP, no waves, no UA, no whatever, and have a really great sounding show just with what's stock and built in. And I was missing that. I was missing that a lot of other desks. You know, I'm spoiled and there's lots of other toys we'll get into here, but I would be totally happy taking this file and doing a flight 8 and spending an hour in virtual with some cans and making some adjustments, adding some more of the built-in processing. And going. I'm using all the built-in reverbs. I've got 12 effect sends and they're all on the desk.
So along
They
with
sound
using
great.
this, you're also using stuff native on
I
the
am.
console.
And the native
Jeez,
stuff
that
sounds
is
great,
awesome.
but honestly, just the channel comp and EQ, you know, a lot of desks, I don't want to name manufacturers, but there are some where you crank on them and it doesn't really feel like they do anything. It doesn't really feel like they get you closer to like a polished, sculpted sound.
Yeah.
They you know, give you something, but they take something else away or sort of leave a hole. This doesn't feel like that. This feels like I can remedy problems or I can enhance, you know, and flatter either way I need to go, just with the tools that are on the desk. I mean, SSL has such a lineage of studio grade hit making sort of equipment, obviously. So it's cool to see how they put all of that super analog sort of technology into a digital workflow. Now, it's very British. And so it feels a little bit like you're driving on the wrong side of the street sometimes, honestly, if you're not used to that workflow, if you've not been on like their large format studio desks, like, you know, GE series, 4K, whatever. There are things about it that some people probably would spend a minute and be like, So if I had to punt, if I had to go do a festival today or I had to go do something where I had a 30-minute sound check, I hadn't heard the material, go. I would probably want to be on like an Avid S6L. We were on those for a while. I love the workflow of those desks. I'm a Pro Tools guy, studio guy. So for me, something where you can, you know, shift click channels and right click, it's like you're using a DAW. And that to me speaks, you know, and same with our artist, Dan, he does everything in Pro Tools. So like produces all the records. So like for us, that we like that language. We toured with that for a while, but in Monitor World is still an Avid S6L. Everyone on stage is really happy with that desk. We used the Rivage stuff a little bit before that. We were support for Shawn Mendes in Australia for a couple weeks, and I had a nice time with it up front. I felt like it was a very like mid-rangey musical sort of sounding desk. Like less is more, don't do too much. That's what I heard from all the reps, and people like, just turn Silk on and just touch it a little. Why do you need all that stuff? But as I've mentioned, and we'll keep saying in this video, I'm sure, I think if you need to process it, you should process it. And I think if you have a goal in mind, you shouldn't say, well, it's live. You don't have to get it there. Like keep going, get as close as you can, right? So to me, this desk does that. This Surface does that. It has all the routing and flow that I would like. This is the 350. I would like to be on the bigger Surface for sure. We're a little limited there in terms of stems and streams and, you know, channel path count, whatever. But it's been plenty enough for a full arena tour. It definitely services that. And it's a great little, you know, two guys can flip it sort of size. It helps with all the toys I have. It helps me keep from getting any bigger. But I would love to be on the 550 or 650 next tour. We'll probably try to get me just a couple more faders. But the 12 per is great. The way it flips and flops feels really natural. The big, huge touch screen is beautiful. There's no mouse. There's no keyboard. That for me was huge. Because on an S6L, I would click, and then I'd be like, oh, I can touch it. And this is like, you don't need that. You touch it. You know, you pinch and you move, and that feels very normal. It feels the way we do everything now. It feels tactile in a very like ergonomic, organic way. So I love all that. I love, again, hats off to Yamaha. This is sort of like that. This is always, these controls are dedicated. They're always doing a thing. So I love that too about the desk. And there's about 4 ways to do everything. So if you find yourself beating your head against a wall and really not enjoying a certain workflow, there's another way to do it. There's another, you know, you can patch X, Y like you're in Midas if you want. And if you don't like that, and you're like, ooh, that looks like not taking controller, get it away. You can instead go in and you can input route per channel, you know, and you can do it that way like you're on an SXL. There's all of those available workflows to you. I haven't found a way I want to do something that it hasn't let me do yet. So I've, it's taken more time, but I'm very happy with it. Love the way it sounds, like the workflow. I work very bus to bus. That's like, I really, again, being the studio mix guy, you know, I want to take my snare mics and I want to send them to a snare bus that goes to a drum bus that goes to a music bus that goes, or whatever, right? I want to be able to shell those layers of gain staging and touch instruments as groups and sort of process top down when I'm able to, in a way. And this desk does that. And some others do, and some don't like that workflow or start to get weird with latency. We stacked about 7 buses and loaded them all up with processing and plugins, and round trip, I think, was like 2.5 milliseconds or something, you know, through all of that. So we did it in Smart and traced it and everything, and it was like, wow, that's awfully phase coherent for how much DSP we're putting in. So yeah, man. I mean, I could go on. This could become an SSL video really quickly. I could say a lot of great things about the desk, but I'm so happy with the way it sounds, and there is a workflow for everyone here if you're willing to invest the time in learning that.
I love it.
Great desk. Yeah, happy to have it. One last thing for me, the local I/O. That's such a thing that a lot of desk manufacturers sort of skip out on. This desk has 6 pair of BNC Matti, 2 pair of fiber, Dante. They have their own Blacklight is like their tactical, you know, optical con fiber for your snake. 16 analog I/O, 8 AS I/O, all on the desk. No engine, no second piece, no thing that can disconnect in the middle of a show. That's just, you turn it on and you have all that. And so for me, having all of that I/O at your fingertips, and that's not even the biggest, you know, desk, the biggest surface. That's huge. I hate having to have all these format converters and bits and bobs and extra pieces and, you know, stage racks out front and stuff like that. And the fact that I can just plug shit right into the desk and it can service everything that I need right in the doghouse, for me, I think is such a boon. I love that. So, yeah, man. Again, it's workflow preference, but we like it. We like the SSL. Very happy with it.
All right. How many inputs?
So we're really about 64 real stage inputs. Now we have way more than that with talkbacks and stuff. We have 24 talkbacks at the moment. So talkbacks, production, that's the creep. That's the thing we're up against. our artist sort of produces the show and runs everything. So he's got a talkback switch on his RF mic. He's quarterbacking with our playback guy, Greg. So Dan and Greg are kind of like the ones that make the show go. Dan is unscrupulous and particular about the way he wants the show to flow and that song to song, the moments with the crowd and the energy and conserving that and that kind of concentration of motion through the set. Yeah. So that is just a little bit of a tangent, but yeah, we've got a load of talkbacks and production-y type of stuff we would love to get at some point, like on a Riedel or some kind of, out of the monitor desk. Yeah. Poor Austin over there has his hands full with all that. But actual inputs, I mean, we're like 14 drum inputs, we're 2 bass, we're a few guitars, and then
live amps or just direct?
We're line 6 helixes for all 3 electrics, Dan, Isaac, and Justin. They're redundant rigs that we have, switches on. They're all driven by MIDI from playback, so those guys can walk anywhere and hit every cue. We love it. There's literally no
the guitar tech loves it too.
The drum kit and Shay's vocal are the only thing you hear coming off the stage. So that's sweet. Bass rig, same deal. We've got like a red DI and a little dark glass, and so it's redundant, A/B switching if we need it. But that's everything's redundant like that. Redundant amps, but it's all DIs essentially. We made a big swap this year actually to go for all of our acoustic instruments. We've got 3, 4 acoustics. We've got a nylon, and we've got a high strung and dobro and all these things that you get in a country tour, and they are all AES right out of the Axient receivers. So there's nothing in the signal path. We go. The thought process for me is it's digital. Once it leaves the instrument and hits that pack, we have to format convert to compand and send it across radio frequencies. Yeah. So we've already done, it's preamplified, it's full scale, it's digital. I don't want to convert it and then convert it again and then convert it again and go to a stage rack. And cutting out all that has made us so low noise and has just meant that video walls and lighting fixture, none of that. Interference is never an issue. So our electrics go AES out of the receiver right into those helixes, digital into the amp, and it's a digital amp, and then AES to the stage rack. We have like almost 24 AES inputs.
It's very intentional.
All of the guitars.
With what you guys are doing.
This is our first year we did that. We were creeping a little bit and kind of feeding into some things like that. But this year it was like, so we took it in the studio, we shot it out, and we said, we have this great DI or that or this bags or grace, and I love all those pieces. If you go do like an acoustic singer-songwriter thing, plugging right in, loading the impedance, it makes a difference there. But once you've already made it into a radio wave, and then you try to make that Shure unit, kick it back out, and make an analog again so you can process it, so you can go back digital into the console. It's like, do we really need to do all that? So we shot it all out, in the studio and listened on monitors and A/B'd, and it wasn't gaining us enough to go through all of those conversions tonally. It was like, let's just semi EQ at this point. And we noticed it at award shows. Like we would bring Dan's special expensive acoustic guitar DI and preamp, and we would put it in line, and maybe it would be noisy one day or this or that or whatever, and we'd get to award, live time, and they'd be like, just pull it, go around on the seat, and then we'd do that, and everyone in the truck that I was in would be like, the guitar sounds so good, and I'd find out only later, we skipped the DI. That's just right out of the receiver. So the more I kept having that anecdotal sort of experience, it's like we should just delete all this shit that's in the way. So for us, every single guitar on stage is AES right out of the receiver into a stage rack, boom, no preamp. Because it's already happened. Sure. Same thing with our vocal mics. So we're going, Axient right out of the receiver and AES into a stage rack, no preamp. And it's the most clean headroom we've had. And what I love about it is it's full scale. And so when you get a clip, you get a clip. And the clip is true and it's real and it sounds bad. It's not like, my desk meter's this way and mine meter's this, the SXL over there is like a plus 24 dBV meter or whatever. And this is just 0 full scale. And I love that because, again, dog eye, if you see red, you hit 0, you're out of bits, you're done. Yeah. So coming out of a receiver where it's like, if we clip that receiver, we clip it at the stick, and that's where the preamp and the AD is. Correct. If we clip it there, we're not gain stage right. So let's gain down until we know we won't clip it there. Smart. And now we come right out of that, and no one else needs to touch it. If I want to trim it one way or he wants to trim it the other, we can obviously do that on our own, but that to me decluttered and kind of unfucked a lot of the signal flow, where it wasn't like, are we hitting that preamp too hard? Do you have your head amp set? Do I have mine set that way? Or analog split and one side can fail and the other can't, and I don't have it, well I do, and it just deleted a lot of that. It simplified it, and I think it's such clean gain staging. I'm a big fan of taking, if it's a digital thing like a keyboard or a modeling amp or anything RF, why make it back analog to make it back digital again? Yeah. So I think it's a lot purer, and to me, I have the palette and the tools if I want to dirty it up and grit it up.
Well, speaking of palette and tools, let's dig into some of this.
Sure.
It's very impressive, and it's very intentional, and even love the labeling you have for everything in bus, and then even where's your master bus?
Down here.
Here, and it's just some beautiful stuff. You spend a lot of time. It's not like you just threw some gear.
Yeah, there were several spreadsheets involved. I got pretty Excel nerdy on this, and even sourcing it, kind of saying, hey, here's 100 manufacturers of shit that I love. What can you get me? And Sound Image this year, they were great. A couple of their guys in the shop, Roz there, and Chris and John, they were all awesome about really digging deep and just giving me this big list of, we have 4 of these, 2 of these, 1 of these that we can get from Europe. There's 6 of these. We have plenty of these. We're low on these in stock. And then I got to kind of pick from there and build it out. So I ended up with basically, this is the drum and drive, and this is the instrument and vocal, roughly. And then in my sled, we have mix bus and we have vocal bus. So the idea with these 2 racks is we have these Rupert Neve satellites, these summing mixers that are 16 by 2 essentially, and either of those. So in this one, it's all of my instruments essentially. I have an acoustic guitar group, an electric guitar group, keys. I have a parallel that I ended up not using, but then I have unlabeled down here my reverb sins for those as well, and bass. So the nice thing is I can, from the desk with all that MADI I/O, I can hit an Andiamo or some converter, and dump from MADI to digital. Right in DB25 into this, and then I can break out and use the inserts on this box to hit all this gear.
That's cool.
So if you were, people get squeamish about Outboard, like, oh, what happened with you? So if the keyboard is lopsided or not metering right or whatever, I can just reach over and do that, and I can take that insert out without ditching all of this gear at the same time. So for me, that's a great workflow. I have a button on the desk to make this whole rack just go away. And break that whole chain. So the way I'm routing that on the desk is, you have whoever's electric guitars, and you have maybe some playback, electric guitar groups, whatever. And those 5, 6, 7, 8 channels go to a stereo electric guitar bus on the desk. That stereo bus kicks out to these MADI outputs, feeds here, and then that bus, for example, since we're talking about guitars, hits this Fatso and this Culture Vulture, which is just blissful, lovely distortion, harmonic land. This piece is crazy. It sounds nuts. It's just a tube driver. It's lovely. The Fatso is great for kind of taking that edge off a solo, so you can just get it really loud without biting people's heads off. That little tape sat circuit that kind of just grabs that top pokey stuff. So, but as an example, that's how we do that. Let me put this back in before I forget.
I was going to say you should.
And then, we touch all that, and that all gets summed here and returns into one of the effect insert returns on the instrument bus. So this takes all of my instrument groups and brings them back to that stereo bus. Same thing with drum roll. There's a kick group and a snare group. We can look at that rack in a minute, and it combines those all, returns them there.
So you're more of a return guy than a send guy.
Yeah, but the nice thing is that I can simultaneously feed the electric guitar group on the desk directly to the instrument bus. And then I can also have it feeding the outboard. The stereo return here breaks that path for me. So the electric guitar bus is not getting to the instrument bus in the desk until I bypass. So the idea is I'm always hitting it digitally right behind this insert. So if I lose the insert, and my gain staging is the same, my structure is the same. I'm not skipping a whole bus, or I just basically fall over to the desk summing instead of this summing, where maybe I have room to process and try to make up for some of the goody, fat, warm stuff that's happening over here. It was really important to me with this much shit that I had a bailout for everything imaginable. We've seen plenty of things fail in different ways, and honestly, the Outboard's been really quite stable. The DB25 connectors have been the biggest pain in the ass. That's not a thing that vendors really stock a lot of. So you end up with like HOSA cable, or just not high quality cable sometimes. Obviously, we had to have them make 3 or 4 pair of DB25 for us. But those connectors, those 25 pin little screws on the side, they're great in the studio, but they tend to rattle
loose. Moving in the truck.
Yeah, and you get them a little bit lopsided, and you lose a pin or 2 on one side or the other. And so today we fired up, and it was like, I don't have a snare, I don't have bass. And Eric went back in there, SE, and nudge and wiggle, tighten down, and everything's fine. And that's why we do it. I've never had any of that happen during the show, but when you go 400, 500 miles in the back of a truck, just rattling all night, it'll do it. So already thinking ahead to the shed tour we're doing a little bit later this year about how to get out of some of the DP25. But that's the workflow roughly, and kind of in chunks here, that's the thing. My vocal strip for Dan and Shay is up here. you know, that's probably an important one because it's sort of money channel. These BSS pieces are old and cool. They're sort of a broadcast piece, but they're a 4-band dynamic EQ.
Okay.
Having some analog dynamic EQ, for me, dynamic EQ is like the thing live. Being able to figure out what band is pokey or not cutting and grab it or push it that day, rather than just cutting it out. Because it's not bad all the time. It's just bad when he's singing that verse and he's low in his register. And so I want to grab that 220 only then, but when he gets up in his register, I want that lower fundamental under to support that tone. So, you know, using a dynamic band means I can grab it when it's blooming too much down there, and then I can step out of the way when it's not, rather than having to chase a band all night or whatever, or just cut it out and have it hollow sounding when he's pushing higher in his range. Shay's super dynamic. He's very, very wide range singer, and so, you know, I have like 3 or 4 places of dynamic, you know, EQ or multiband compression happening to try to, again, get out of the way of that, but control it when I need to. So those pieces are great. These Empirical Labs, I love them. They're lovely. I mean, it's essentially just an EQ with a de-esser, and the de-esser is just heavenly. I think it's the closest thing to like the vintage DBX, you know, 902s or whatever. They make this in a 500 series as well, and I would recommend. It's kind of a desert island piece. People don't think about de-essing that much, but whether it's like an acoustic guitar or lead vocal, an electric guitar solo, any of that, being able to again dynamically touch the pokey bit, but leave it when they're playing lighter. Or for a vocalist, just getting a vocal bright and present, but not taking people's heads off with all of that essing. You know, even in post-production video, stuff like this, it's amazing how much you have to de-ess because we just naturally, most of us speak and talk and sing with a lot of sibilants.
Yes.
That's the human voice, and getting
pokey bit.
Yeah, getting the pokey
like
bit,
that.
getting those you know, those consonants down so the vowels can be clear and the vowels can still have some top end to them. Really, really helps for clarity and enunciation and people hearing all the words. And so I can't recommend de-essing well enough. And yeah, this is a place where, to me, an analog tool just beats the shit out of most things in the box. You know, our de-esser is awesome, but it's not gonna do this.
Sure.
And then I've got a Veramu that I'm using one side on either, decoupled for them. I'm it's studio rad of me. I just love this piece. I think it does this slow leveling sort of. They call it the 10 dB limiter on the back of the box, and it just puts a blanket on it and kind of puts it in a place where it's always present and always kind of juicy. Dan doesn't need it quite as much as Shay, but I also have a CL1B on the back of Shay after that. So I have 2 tube comps. You'll see neither are ever doing more than about 2.5. So you end up with 4 or 5 all in. It's not a crazy amount.
Okay.
And again, that's him being very dynamic. When he's singing quiet, they just kind of nudge the needle a little. But I'm not afraid of doing a little bit with them because I like the way both these boxes sound. I'm a big fan of tiered compression. I think, you know, parallel compression is great, but serial compression, I think asking one box to do everything can be great. And if you can only have one piece, well, hell yeah, that's gonna level up your vocal sound.
Yeah.
But if you can have a couple, and then maybe touch the desk comp a little bit, and then maybe touch the bus comp and the vocal, to me, doing a little bit in all those places gets you something that's much more polished and that sounds a lot more like, you know, like a record, and that can be hyper present, but also packaged in a musical way, because you don't hear the action of one compressor just, you know, squeezing and grabbing in. You hear a little action from this and a little action from that, and your brain doesn't, you can't quite nail a sonic, you know, signature there and go, oh, I know that piece is, that 1176 is doing 20 dB. And sometimes that's the sound, right? But for a lead vocal, for me, usually not. Usually tiered serial compression.
I like that tiered serial
Yeah,
compression.
that kind of
like
gets
that.
you to that finished product faster than expecting like a channel comp on a desk to be able to hit 10 dB and not sound.
Do you feel like it's part of your studio side that is doing the inspiring that?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, having to make a mixed sound for picture or radio or whatever, you know, getting it to that package place where it can go that far and get that loud but that clear but still be musically dynamic.
Yeah.
I think it takes using high quality tools gently and carefully and intentionally. You said earlier. So yeah, I absolutely. I think that's part of the thing.
You can see the recording studio side of you just by all this.
Yeah,
I love it.
I know it's indulgent, and I mean, you don't need this to have a great show. You really don't. Your instincts and your ears matter more. But yeah, for me, this is that sauce and that sort of like flattery and that extra little bit that I can reach for and push, and I can leave certain parts of frequency ranges I might have to cut otherwise because I'm saturating them in a certain way, or I'm treating them in a certain way that that you just sometimes can't do with native tools, you know, or you run out of native tools, or you end up doing with plugins and it sounds a little phasier, and you end up with time alignment issues, and this shit's voltage, you know. There's no zeros and ones here. It's tubes and transformers and a lot of all of that, and to me that makes a difference. I mean, we are talking about the last 3 to 8%. Like, it's sometimes kind of that ethereal bell curve, the very end of it, and you're, you know, the cost and the size and the heat, you're really on up there to get that last little milked bit out. But that's me. I like pushing the ceiling and kind of taking the chance on stuff like this. So.
I love seeing the pendulum swing from, like, back in the day when I started, it was all analog, and then it seemed like we made the switch to all digital. It seems like the pendulum now is coming back to like, let's go back to the basics here.
I think this stuff is kind of.
But there's a lot of cool new stuff coming out as well.
None of this is really old gear per se. I mean, some of this may be a little bit. Most of this is current production. Even if some of these maybe have 8 or 10 years on them, a lot of this they're still making most of it, and some of it's brand new. I mean, that Rupert Neve Master Bus converter that came out
let's go to
last
Master
year.
Bus.
So mixed bus down here. We have the SSL Bus Plus. This is my first year using this guy. There is a G series comp built into the desk, and it sounds awesome. But if you can have, the sort of the Cadillac version, you should. This piece is crazy. It's also, I think, if you wanted one thing on your left right that does a lot, I advocate for this piece. It is sort of like your typical G bus or whatever, SSL bus comp in these 5 knobs here. It has your side chain, it has a parallel mix knob. So it feels a little more like a plug-in in that way, that you get those extra new current modern age tools. It has a feedback mode, which makes it a little more like a 2500 and gets you some of that, the compressed signal fed back into the detector circuit. That kind of smooths out the response a little bit, makes it a little rounder, a little bit fatter, meatier to me. The 4K mode actually lets you turn up the amount of distortion the box makes. So
cool.
I'm actually leaning towards like the 70s model right now with how much I have dialed in. And I think it's super musical. I think it's nice sounding, but they essentially modeled the amount of THD in the very original, golden era kind of ones that aren't as full range and aren't as nice sounding, but because of that kind of do a thing people like. So it's cool to have that feature. And then there's also 2 dynamic EQ bands. There's a low shelf, and then there's a high shelf that can also be a bell. So I'm using the high bell around 6K, only letting it do up to like 2 dB. You can set a max amount of gain reduction on those, which is really clever. And then the low end is just a shelf down at like 40 or 50. But that means some days where the low end just feels a little too bleamy, I can grab it there. And then there is a G band EQ, just like from the console, where you can make that low end back up, set at the same frequency. So dynamic EQ, again, like that is the cheat code, I think, in a lot of ways, to keep more of the content there, but control it whenever there's an abundance of it in the source material. We're mixing for a 20-song set, so that moves a lot, and I can't touch all these knobs. I can't grab every EQ on every channel. You could do scenes, but then you start to get really radical. Something changes. It's a little bit, to me, that's a little bit scarier than having something dynamic that you can trust and you can musically kind of mix into and move with. So that's the Bus Plus. Another manly piece. I'm a sucker for.
You are.
I own a massive passive and a Very in my studio, and I use them all the time. I mastered through those for years and know them really well. This is actually, they hooked me up. This is the mastering version with the beautiful, expensive detinted pots. So it's recallable. It's lovely. Actually, we found the high pass and low pass are really quite saving. That 15K low pass kind of adds a sheen to it. It does almost like a Pultecki Baxendall thing, but also seems to package and keep us out of, when we get to that last song and we're banging it out and we're using every bit of the PA we have, that kind of helps us stay out of HF limit on the amps. So, again, packaging some of that supersonic stuff without deleting it like a plugin might. It takes an $8,000 EQ. Sorry, I hate it does. But if you want to do that kind of thing, and like the UAD version of this is great. Those things are out there, but hell of a piece, love it. And then the master bus converter I mentioned a minute ago, new. Sound Image was kind enough to actually track this down and acquire this for me this year. This I like a lot. Let me get that out of the way. This I love. The master bus processors I think are cool and fine. They're pretty ubiquitous. That's that 2-unit that has all the stereo field editor and the compressor and limiter, and kind of like a modern 33609 meets master bus. I'm fine with that piece. I'm not in love with it personally. I see a lot of guys use it. It's cool. It doesn't get me that excited. This thing does something different. It's got a really beautiful transparent limiter that they sort of feel like is this dual stage intelligent release that they think can out-limit any sort of plugin. I've not shut it out with Pro L or something like that, but it's a great limiter. I can just kind of take, a dB or so off the snare, off of that very top peak. And again, that packages my mix in a little bit more of a transparent musical kind of way, that when I hand it to Eric and we put it in the PA, maybe we can get another dB or 2 of loudness out of the room, because we're not, we're controlling some of that very top level of the dynamic of the show without taking the energy away, hopefully, right? There's a sidechain, there is a transformer, which I am using, and I think it solidifies things a little bit. And then there is also silk across the entire mix, which is cool. I'm using silk there and on both of these. I think silk's a really cool circuit. I'm not a fanboy. I'm not like the Rupert Neve stand where it's like silk on everything, it fixes everything. But it's a really nice sounding circuit. It's not a desert island thing for me, but if it's there, I almost always use it, and I think it can add back in some of what you take out. The blue can add in some of that low thickness if you had to cut a lot of 200 or 100 out of the room that day, and the red can kind of bring some of that, scratchy, tubey, tapey sort of air back into some of your sources. If like 3, 5, 8, 7K, whatever, just didn't sound nice in the room and you had to kind of dig that out, you can sort of put it back harmonically with something that has a softer transient. So yeah, lovely piece. That's the mix bus. This is the vocal bus, the multi-band, the GML. I was spoiled with these this year. I don't know that I'll get to keep these moving forward, but I ended up bypassing this, but these Sonic Farm creamliners, I have 4 of those. That's a 380 volt tube line driver. There's not even input. All there is output and a fat and air, sort of a little bit of a shelfy situation.
Yeah, there's a lot of
tube
creamliners
modes,
here.
but yeah, they essentially tell you don't open it unless you know how to discharge capacitors because of how high voltage it is.
Wow.
And so it does a thing. It's very subtle. Anytime I heard these and heard people compare them, I don't know why the secret's not out more, but they had 7 in inventory, and I was like, give me all of them. But I ended up with 4, which I get very indulgent. But I've got one on my instrument bus over here, one on the drum bus, one on the vocal bus, so kind of my 3 groups. And then the 4th one is actually on all of my track percussion. So that kind of lets me grid up, some of those programmed 808s and kicks and snares and backbeats and make them a little fuzzier, kind of, so they sit in with the live kit a little better. I can use them to support. They don't, it's not like that record, snare or whatever that cuts over your live one. I can kind of process it a little more the same. So yeah, that's what's going on there. And then again, this is drum rack. This was, I don't know if I'll do it again, but I really enjoyed this idea of summing the drums kind of, as their own thing. So it's a little out of order because we made some changes, but essentially kick group, that's kick in and out. Snare group is snare top, snare bottom, a timbale, and a side snare. So, 4 there. Stereo toms. So all 3 toms go to stereo bus, and then ride, hi-hat, and the 2 overheads are in the cymbal group. This drum parallel, actually, we ditched that. We have all my track percussion here. Loop, we have loop, stereo snare, and stereo kick. Those are a pretty wide range, kind of rough terms, but essentially 3 pairs, 6 channels of all your programmed track stuff. And those I'm using the second stereo bus, processing them, and then returning them right here. And then they get summed with the rest of the kit. So they get summed, those 6 down to 2, beat up a little bit, processed with the fusion and
bring them back up,
and the creamliner, and then brought back in to sum to the kit. And then that returns to the desk. Same way as the instruments, where if I hit the bypass button, all of those mics and groups still hit my drum bus on the desk. We just lose all the goodies. But very first show, first night, we lost some piece of snare outboard, some signal, and Eric was like, sorry, bud, got it dumped. And I was like, and I went to push the button. And I was like, I don't have to lose all of this. I can just do that. And then I started digging out on the desk, and by the end of the song, it was great. It was fine. We made up for it, hit it harder on the desk, pushed a little more, dug out a little more, did some of the things I was doing here approximately with the tools on the desk, and it worked. So that was a great reminder that, hey, you can do it all here, and it sounds good. If you have a good desk and good gain staging, so people that are afraid to use this stuff, if you have the option, I think go for it. Just be practical about your bailout buttons and programming a way out of it. Practice that, know what you're gonna do if that happens. But for me, if you can have it, you should have it. And so this is a pretty indulgent rack. I think drum sound and vocal sound are kind of a thing and for live music, a modeling amp sounds a lot like a modeling amp. Now, am I going to try to touch it and ritz it up a little and maybe add a little harmonic, pizzazz to it? Sure. But getting a kick and a snare to sound like a record live is tough. You stick a 57 on top of a snare drum and it doesn't sound bad. It sounds like a snare drum, but it doesn't sound like a record ever. It doesn't sound even close. It's miles away. There's all this build up and all these things missing, and there's so much to be done to get it even closer to like a late 90s, early 2000s production, much less now. And it's live music, but to me, that's the bar. We're playing with there's a playback element, and there's lots of stuff in the playback. And so blending those 2 things, I would rather, as much as I can, level up the live inputs to get closer and closer to that sort of finished record sound.
Sure.
And when you're recording in the studio, you get all these gain stages and times to do it, right?
Yeah.
Like someone engineered in a room, A-list player, A-list, A++ gear, cartage, whatever, all this budget, and then it gets edited, and then it gets mixed, and then it gets mastered, and all of these stages make it more and more and more what we're used to hearing.
And you go to your car, listen to it, get out, come back to your car, listen to it again.
But in the live world, you get one time to do all of that. So this may seem silly, but there's 3 times all of this probably on, with the plugins and this producer and that pre-mixer and this mixer and that remix and this mastering engineer. There's probably 3 or 4 times this amount of shit on most of the records you listen to every day, whether that's country or pop or rock. Americana, I don't care, right? Yeah. A lot of those things are still very, very intentionally processed. And so I'm always seeking to kind of, limit that difference a little bit and get us closer to there without losing that energy, of course. But
the goal is to reproduce the record.
Yes, 100%. Right? If only. but if you can give it more energy and more of like an emotional pull live, but also kind of sonically start to approach that, I think that's the dream. It's easier said than done, but Yeah, and then this is our drive down here. Eric's got a redundant rig with a couple P1s. We are all in an L acoustics situation. K1 over K2, KS28s. We've actually got most of our subs in the air this year, and we love that. That's been huge, way more even. It also means that, kind of the guys stepping out on the thrust have more of an even experience. We have 8 ground subs, and we didn't run them cardioid this year. And that made a big difference for the flown subs. Those 12 are cardioid, but the ground subs are not. And so that kind of evened out the low end response and the timing, so that as the artist walks from the main deck, that promoter deck, out onto the deck we carry, and they get 20 feet, 30 feet in front of the rig, the timing doesn't suddenly change of that impact. It's a little more consistent. We all have gotten in such a mode of making the stage so quiet, which is really cool that we can. You think about like products like GSL and KSL, and there's a lot of ways to hypercardioid presets and stuff like that, where you can just make a stage like a pin drop almost and still be at 96, 98 dB out here. But if you have an artist that moves to and fro, in front and behind, I think that there's a detriment there too. So that was something we fought against from the last arena tour and kind of tried to make up for this time, is giving them more of a cohesive experience from the main deck to the thrust, so they didn't feel like, whoa, whoa, I'm behind myself now, and does the impact feels really
I'm jumping
off.
in water now, and it feels
Yeah, that's something you have to be sensitive to. So for us, that's been great, and we're not killing anybody, back there. Eric's done a great job, obviously, steering it and using it intentionally, the low end. Playback's right next to that guitar, they're tuning guitars right over there, just behind all of that, and people are very, very happy. They're not like, oh, I'm dying. So yeah, that's what we got going on here. 128 channel record rig. That was kind of that was a big ask at 96K. Again, the desk has all the MADI in the world to do it, which I love this desk for. So we have 4 pair of MADI, 32, times 4. We got an MGR this year, which is pretty clever little, bit of waves kit. And with a single Cat 5 cable and some very stringent, specific requirements you have to meet that, we weren't all on the same page about. You can jam that into a MacBook and you can record. So I'm not doing 128. I mean, I'm doing like 80. But 64 wasn't enough. And I had to, I want to print my left-right every night. I want to print my 4 room mics. What if? I want to take all the inputs in case we do an award show where they want to take the drums, take the this, take the that, and, mix that and go take it to a TV performance or something, right? Live to track kind of stuff. Or just for posterity or to review with the artist, the band, whatever. That stuff's important. And for us, for virtual too, having that all come back channel to channel, having time code in there, having click in there, that stuff was important, and at some point I was having to pick and choose what went to record and what didn't. I was like, this is stupid. I just want to be able to push. Yeah, and honestly, it beat us up pretty bad for the first week or so of rehearsals. We were fucking with that a lot, and it was very frustrating. But eventually, our good sound image folks got the Claire record machine guy, and he brought a couple computers, and we had figured out at that point that this little Sonnet dongle, it's like their Thunderbolt 4 or whatever dongle. You've got to have a 1,000 whatever the higher 10 gigabit, whatever, not a single gigabit, networky bullshit that you have to do now to do audio, I guess, to get that amount of throughput and do it, without the machine crashing. But now it's super stable. We're very happy with it. And like I said, just knowing that you just push record and you don't think about it, that's important to me in a record rig, is that I can capture the whole show with confidence. And if video or lighting or content, whoever needs some kind of bounce or some kind of something, I can pull it up on the bus in Pro Tools and I can process it or listen to it or do whatever. We have a fill-in drummer this week, and Monday night at 9 p.m. they were like, he needs a board tape, and Tuesday by 10 I had it to him, and it was the whole show rundown, just how we do it, and he learned it in 48 hours. He's killing it. So being able to do that is, you just never know when you're going to get that call, and you get to be the hero, or at least show up and not be the one that lets everybody down if you're tracking all that. So an unsung part of the rig maybe, but very important. A pain in the ass when it doesn't work right, but we're very stable now, very happy with the way it's working. So yeah, that's I think that's most of it. Any questions? The 108Ps are huge for me. We nerd out about these a lot, but you probably see these a lot. I know they're in a little bit of a weird position. This is what we had. They didn't really fit there without blocking my view, but having something coaxial driven that actually voices similar to K, to actually hanging arena size PA was very important for me, and we've done that a few years now. And even in rehearsals, if they put me in like a little side room with these and a little, powered 15 or whatever the matches, I'm happy as can be. I can mix on those all day. And when I take it into arena, if the SE is great like Eric, it fucks out of the gate. It goes. It just works. It stands up. So love these. They're hard to find. Everybody wants them. But they're great near fields. They're plenty of power. I can line check with them and hit that kick and snare loud enough that it cuts over a full room in line check before the downbeat. But I can also sensitively, mix it 80 dB and make little moves in them too. So they're kick-ass, man. I'm very grateful for them. So yeah, highly recommended.
What advice would you give to new engineers that are just starting and they want to be in your position one day?
So in my position, right, I've been with the same artist for 10 years. I'm kind of a lifer with these guys now, and I've done everything I can to ingratiate myself with them. And at first that was like doing everything, everything short of driving pretty much, It's like, yeah, I'll do monitors. Yeah, I'll do front house. Yeah, I'll take the playback rig. Yeah, I'll tune the drums. Yeah, I'll do a guitar change. Like whatever. I was just everywhere all the time. And it was exhausting. It was too much, and I wasn't getting paid enough. But that's the scrappy thing. And they saw that, and I grew with them. And being willing to invest on that level, not work for free or cheap and not short sell yourself, but put your time in and sort of ingratiate yourself with the artist where they trust you and they believe your feedback is valuable. They value you as more than just a front of house engineer, as a guy that can mix. Because there are hired guns that, make amazing week rates to come out and just pop in and do this tour and pop out and do that tour. If you want to be in the position I'm in, where like you're salaried and you're part of that artist's thing, and they take you wherever they do whatever, whether it's acoustic or just them on a TV show or this in an arena or a stadium or whatever, they want you there because they know you'll tell them how it sounds and they know you'll do your best to whatever needs to be done that day, make sure they sound how they're supposed to sound. So that means to me learning all of it, like knowing everything from signal flow and I know how to console, I know this console, well, I know that one. Cool, great. Like, do you know what do you think about vocal tuning? Do you know about editing? Like, do you know vocal pitch pretty well? Can you communicate that? Like, are you a musical person? I think it does take both to do it at a high level. I think you have to be musically capable and able to replicate pitch and understand harmony if you want to kind of be in that position. Not everybody does. Some people just want to know the tech, stay in this lane. But we don't have a dedicated MD because Dan sort of is the producer MD guy, but he also has to be the artist sometimes. So he can't always be that. So I sort of ghost MD a lot is what I say. And occasionally on an email chain, my production manager is like, this is our for now's MD. And that's not actually my title, but I do it a lot because I know it and I love it. And I know how their stuff's supposed to sound. So if you want to get in with an artist, I think learning the music is really important. Learning their set moves. I could probably blindfolded tell you everything they're going to say between each moment in the set, roughly. Just because I've done it and it's been intentional to me to learn those moments and surf and kind of perform with them. So I think it's important to get into that level if you want to build that kind of longevity with an artist. Not everybody may, but it's great experience, and I think that it's a really capable workflow that's grown with me. We did 200 days a year or whatever back 5-6 years ago when we were grinding, and now they've settled into doing 60 or 70, and I have a family and a home in Nashville, and I can come home to that on the week, and I can be here on the weekends and do whatever I want to do with the rest of my time, whether that's take time off or be in the studio or work with other artists, So that's a pretty sweet gig, and that took, like I said, kind of doing it all, showing up, being very multidisciplinary, being able to understand backline, not being like, that's not my world, I'm not going to help. Hey, let me get up there and help you figure out why that guitar isn't passing. What if we did stack that part? What if we changed that guitar arrangement? When it's asked, having it ready to offer and having an informed opinion and having, sort of a confident reason to answer when the artist starts to trust you. I think that ground level sort of thing is, I think that's how you build a lifelong career if you want to do that with an artist and be that guy, Not everybody does. And I think the hired gun flying in and out thing is sick too, and just not where my career trajectory has taken me. But I'm able to maintain a home life and have a family and, have a dependable paycheck and not go through these seasons of feast and famine like I did for years because I've built that sort of with an artist. So it's one of many viable workflows and paths open to engineers and folks that want to do live sound. But I think it's a really good one, Grass is always greener, but I'm very grateful that I'm able to kind of have a real life and be a grown up and a normal functioning human most of the year, but also do the coolest job that there is and have the most fun helping people connect with music and being very trusted by very musically capable, Grammy-winning, just nutso talented artists who care and are so particular. That's enough for me, and that's become something that I'm very, very beyond content with. I'm so gracious and feel very fortunate that that's something that I get to do. So, I guess my advice is don't stop learning, don't stop pushing, get good at all of it. Don't limit yourself to your little cubicle. Reach across the aisle, be willing to help everybody. That matters, and people notice that, and you will be retained if you would like to be retained because of that. we've got a PA tech right now who is like that, and he's helping with stage moves, and he's helping with this, he's helping with backline, and he's filling all these gaps. And yeah, like that's, I think if he wants it, he'll have a future with the artist because of that. You know, like that's how you do that. If you want to get picked up, because I hear people all the time, I see on Reddit, like, I work at this club in town, and they bring this cool touring man came with their engineer, and like, how do I do that?
Yeah.
Well, you got to meet a touring man, and you got to make them like you. You know, you have to also be good at what you do, but show up, keep showing up, keep saying yes, keep doing it. So, yeah, that was a big, long-winded sort of meandering thing, but hopefully that's at least something for people to chew on.
Man, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you. If people want to follow you, where can they follow you at?
So I'm not on social media. I exist on Reddit, but otherwise kind of following along with what the band does or whatever. That's it. My studio is called 4115 in Nashville, and we're active on socials and have a website. And if you're in Nashville and want to come by and visit, find me, message us, and let us know you saw this, and the message will get to me, and we can
there you go.
show you around or whatever. So,
or come to a Dan and Shay show near you. Man, thank you so much. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Brother.
Great to be
Awesome.
here.
Yeah, good.